Welcome everyone. In the previous video, we saw the boy's most exciting experience of watching an encounter between a mongoose and a cobra. The boy was then sitting on the banyan tree. He gets a clear vision of the fight from there. Besides him, a crow and a myna witness the fight. The fighters were real champions and had their own different fighting techniques. When we stopped, the cobra was once bitten by mongoose, the clever and aggressive fighter. Let's begin. Text page number 13. First paragraph. The moment the cobra struck, the crow and the myna hurled themselves at him, only to collide heavily in mid-air. Shrieking at each other, they returned to the cactus plant. Okay, now the moment the cobra struck, the crow and the myna hurled here means threw or rushed swiftly themselves at him. That means both the crow and the myna rushed very fast together towards the cobra. But what happened? They only collided, they only hit together heavily in the mid-air. In the mid-air, both of them had a collision. Shrieking at each other, they returned to the cactus plant. Because of the collision, both the birds cried sharply or crying sharply at each other, returned to the cactus plant. They were actually sitting there before and they returned to the same place. A few drops of blood glistened on the cobra's back. The cobra struck again and missed. Again the mongoose sprang aside, jumped in and bit. Again the birds dived at the snake, bumped into each other. Instead, and returned shrieking to the safety of the cactus. Okay, a few drops of blood glistened on the cobra's back. Why it happened there? Okay, you know that cobra was bitten by mongoose, so there came out some blood, and some drops of blood began to glisten or shine or glitter, or we can see the glittering of drops of blood on the back of the cobra. The cobra struck again and missed. Again the cobra strikes, but what happened this time also? Cobra could not do anything to the clever mongoose. Again the mongoose sprang aside. When the cobra tried to strike back, the mongoose, just like a very clever fighter, sprang aside, jumped to one side to skip its biting, and at the next moment jumped towards the cobra and bit. The second time also it again the birds dived at the snake. This time the birds who are watching this cannot remain there as mere spectators. They also wanted to take part in the fight, and their enmity was towards the snake. So together they dived at the snake, bumped into each other instead, but this time also they collided into each other and returned shrieking to the safety of the cactus. The second time also their attempt to attack the snake or their attempt to support mongoose in his fight failed. Why? Because both of them collided in the air or bumped into each other and shrieking, screaming screaming in a shrill voice, return to a safe place. Which is the safe place? It is the cactus, and they began to sit there for a next chance. The third round followed the same course as the first, but with one dramatic difference. The crow and the myna, still determined to take part in the proceedings, dived at the cobra. The myna flew on and reached its perch, but the crow tried to pull up in mid-air and turned back. In the second that it took him to do this, the cobra whipped his head back and struck with great force, his snout thudding against the crow's body. See what happened here. The third round of the fight followed the same course at the first, but with one dramatic difference. But here there was a difference in this third round, different from the first two rounds. The crow and the myna, still determined to take part in the proceedings. Okay, now the crow and myna are here not just like a spectators of this fight, but our boy is a mere spectator. Crow and myna were not just ready to remain there just like that. They were determined to take part in the proceedings. The proceedings here means the activities which are going on between the mongoose and the cobra. Dived at the cobra. This time also they dived at the cobra, but this time they missed each other as well as their mark. This time what happened, when they tried two times previously they failed. Why? Because both of them hit together, and this time the same thing happened, but one more thing, they lost their mark. They went beyond the boundary. They went beyond the limit. The myna flew on and reached its perch. But what happened? The myna, a clever bird, flew on continuously, moves on and reaches its perch. Perch here means a branch of tree or any place where a bird sits or a bird considers as its roost or nest. Okay. But the crow tried to pull up in midair. At the same time, what happened to Mina's colleague here? Crow tried to pull up in midair. So what was the result? By pulling up in midair, it tried to turn back. What was the result of that? In the second that it took him to do this, the same moment it tried to pull up in midair and turn back, would have happened? The cobra whipped his head. It was the exact moment for cobra to act. Cobra whipped his head or lashed his head back and struck with great force. Using its great force, it strikes the crow, which was there pulling up in midair and trying to turn back, his snout thudding against the crow's body. And how was the striking? It was with a great force, with a great might. Why? Because at that time the cobra was very much angry and also in the midst of a fight against mongoose. His snout thudding against the crow's body. So what happened? Forcefully the snout here means the long and projecting nose or mouth of the snake, thud with it hit against the crow's body very forcefully, very strongly. Unfortunately, what happened here? Okay, crow is bitten or struck by the cobra, and what happened to that crow? Let us see that in the next paragraph. I saw the bird flung nearly 20 feet across the garden, where after fluttering, where after fluttering about for a while, it lay still. The miner remained on the cactus plant, very wisely refrained from interfering again. I saw the bird flung nearly 20 feet across the garden. What happened? Because of the forceful thudding, against the crossbody by the cobra, the bird was flung or thrown nearly 20 feet across the garden. Why? Because it was such a very forceful thudding, and were after fluttering about for a while, and it is now lying down about 20 feet across the garden, and from where it flutter here means flap its wing for its life. For a while only it flutters like that, because the cobra is venomous and very dangerous, and within moments it began to affect the poor crow, and it lay still. uh, that means it lost its life, the remaining life also lost. The miner remained on the cactus plant, very wisely refrained from interfering again. The miner remained on the cactus plant. This time, we can see another thing, that was the miner, the clever miner remaining on the cactus plant. Miner has very cunningly escaped the attack of cobra and was now there on the cactus plant, very wisely refrained from interfering again. And this time, she is called a wise Maina. Why? Because she was wise enough never to return and interfere the fighting again. She knew that it would be very dangerous, and so she remained there on the cactus plant. The cobra was weakening, and the mongoose, walking fearlessly up to it, raised himself on his short legs, and with lightning snap had the big snake by the snout. The cobra writhed and lashed about in a frightening manner, and even coiled itself about the mongoose, but all to no avail. The little fellow hung grimly on until the snake had ceased to struggle. He then smelt along its quivering length, and gripping it round the hood, dragged it into the bushes. The miner dropped cautiously to the ground, hopped about, peered into the bushes from a safe distance, and then, with a shrill cry of congratulation, flew away. Okay, now the cobra was weakening. You know why? Because it was bitten twice by our mongoose, and its strength was going down, and then this was the correct time for our mongoose to give so many more blows to our cobra, walking fearlessly up to it. Now, mongoose was very much fearless. Why? Because he knew that his opponent was weakening. Fearlessly up to it, raised himself on his short legs, and it would be a very nice scene for a cobra to raise, to see like that, a cobra raising its on its front short legs, and with lightning snap. Lightning snap here means snap here, it is bite. Maybe in this situation it is bite with the lightning snap. Lightning, as fast as lightning, had the big snake by the snout. Okay, had the big snake by the snout here means he caught the big snake, the cobra, by the snout. You know what is snout? Okay. The cobra writhed and lashed about in a frightening manner. Okay, when he was caught by the snout, what happened? The cobra began to fight for its life, and so he began to writhe, twist and twist. Okay, and very much frightened also, and even coiled itself about the mongoose. Okay, the cobra even tried to coil its remaining body around the mongoose, his opponent, and the cobra was fighting for its life. It was the last final attempt for the cobra, but all to no avail, but everything ended in no use, everything entered useless. There was no use. The cobra cannot escape itself from the uh, clutches of or a strong bite of this mongoose. But all to no avail. The little fellow hung grimly on. Little fellow here is the mongoose. Hung grimly on here means hung seriously, very strongly. The little fellow's hanging on to that was very serious and very firm until the snake had ceased to struggle. Actually, mongoose want to seize the snake. Seize the snake here means to stop its life or to kill it until it is it is sure, until it is sure he want to continue in the same manner. Okay, he then smelt along its quivering length. After he made sure that now the snake is very weak or it is about to die, then smelt along its quivering length. Okay, it's a life. There was still life in its body, and the remaining long body of the snake was quivering or shaking or shivering. And then what we can see, the mongoose smelling the quivering body of the snake and gripping it round the hood, and after that he gripped it, caught it round the hood, dragged it into the bushes. The miner dropped cautiously to the ground. Hopped about, peered into the bushes from a safe distance. And what was miner doing this time? Okay, now the miner thought that it would be safe to come down from the top of the bushes or here from the cactus and dropped here means came down cautiously, very carefully to the ground. Hopped here means move in a jumping way. Okay, hopped about, peered into the bushes, and peered here means looked very carefully into the bushes. Why? Because now the snake is there, and who has taken the snake into the bushes? Okay, it is mongoose has dragged it into the bushes, and there also the miner was keeping a safe distance. Miner was not dare enough to move very close to the snake. Why? Because Miner has learned a lesson from the experience of his fellow or his friend crow. That is why. And then with a shrill cry of congratulation flew away. And then before flying away from there, it expressed its congratulation to mongoose in a shrill cry. And after that flew away. When I had also made a cautious descent from the tree and returned to the house, I told grandfather of the fight I had seen. He was pleased that the mongoose had won. He had encouraged it to live in the garden, to keep away the snakes, and fed it regularly with scraps from the kitchen. He had never tried taming it, because wild mongoose was more useful than a domesticated one. Okay, when I had also made a cautious decision, I here refers to that the boy was now watching everything, sitting in the platform constructed by himself. Okay, and cautiously, very carefully, he came down from the tree and returned to the house. Okay, he went back to his house. I told the grandfather, and after reaching back home, he began to tell his grandfather about the horrible fight that he had seen. He was pleased that, and he was very happy that the mongoose had won. Okay, it was a pleasing thing because they all wanted the mongoose to win the fight. It happened so became happy. He had encouraged it to live in the garden. Okay, he here stand for grandfather. Grandfather was really encouraging the animal, that mongoose, to live in the garden, or that mongoose had actually got the support of our grandfather. Why? To keep away the snakes. Okay, grandfather knew that if this mongoose is there, it can keep away the snakes. Why? Because both mongoose and snakes are enemies, and fed it regularly with the scraps from the kitchen, and he would always give it food. Scraps here means the fragments of left out left over food, the fragments of food which is left over by others, or remains of food from the kitchen would be given to or would be used to feed the animal. He had never tried taming it. Even so, the grandfather never wanted to tame, never wanted to domesticate the animal, because wild mongoose was more useful than a domesticated one, because he knew that secret. What was that? Domesticated one are not as much useful as this. Why? Because they will be lazy, they won't be doing anything to keep the snakes away. But the untamed mongoose are different from that. That is why our grandfather did not want to domesticate a mongoose. Okay. From the banyan tree, I often saw the mongoose patrolling the four corners of the garden. And once I saw him with an egg in his mouth and knew he had been in the poultry house. But he hadn't harmed the birds. And I knew grandmother would forgive him for stealing as long as he kept the snakes away from the house. From the banyan tree, I often saw the mongoose. Okay, patrolling the four corners. Patrolling here means going round watchfully the four corners of the garden. He was going round the four corners of the garden, and once I saw him with an egg in his mouth. The another time when he saw the mongoose, he had an egg in his mouth. He knew he had been in the poultry house. From where he got that? He got it from the poultry house, but he hadn't harmed the birds. He took an egg from the poultry house, that's very clear, but he did not do any harm to the birds in the poultry farm or house. And I knew grandmother would forgive him for stealing as long as he kept the snakes away from the house. Okay, grandmother, if grandmother see the mongoose with an egg in his mouth, nothing will happen. He will be forgiven. Why? Because if he is there, snakes will be kept away. Snakes will be more dangerous than this mongoose. Grandmother knew that. That is why he also would not do anything for this type of stealing. The banyan tree was also the setting for what we were to call a strange case of the grey squirrel and a white rat. The white rat was grandfather's. He had brought it from he had bought it from the bazaar for 4 annas. But I would often take it with me into the roots and branches of the old tree. Banyan tree, where it soon struck up a friendship with one of the squirrels. They would go off together on little excursions among the branches. The banyan tree was also the setting for what we were to call the strange case of the grey squirrel and the white rat. Okay, there happened something between grey squirrel and white rat. Let us read and find out what is that. The white rat was grandfather's. Okay, grandfather on the white rat, and he bought it from the bazaar for 4 annas. 4 anna here means 1 by 16 of rupees. 4 anna is equal to 1 by 16 of rupees. Anna is 1 by 16 of rupees. But I would often take it with me into the roots and branches of the olive tree. But I would often take it with me into the roots and branches of the olive tree. The boy would often take the white rat into the branches of the olive tree, banyan tree, where it soon struck up a friendship with one of the squirrels. Okay, in the banyan tree there were so many squirrels, and this white rat very soon became friendship with one of the squirrels in the banyan tree. They would go off together, and the white rat and the squirrel would go off, would move together, making noise. or maybe in angry on little excursions among the branches. They actually were leading a type of excursions, or they were moving, they were always seen moving together, making noise among the branches of the tree. Then the squirrel started building a nest. At first, she tried building it in my pockets, and when I went indoors and changed my clothes, I would I would find straw and grass falling out. Then one day, grandmother's knitting was missing. We hunted for it everywhere, but without success. Next day, I saw something glinting in the hole in the banyan tree. Going up to investigate, I saw that it was the end of grandmother's steel knitting needle. On looking further, I discovered that the hole was crammed with knitting, and amongst the wool were three baby squirrels, all of them white. Then the squirrel started building a nest. Okay, it's very clear. At first, she tried building it in my pockets. Okay, it's a different thing. Why? Because the squirrel was very much uh, in company with the boy. So at first, the female squirrel tried to build its nest in the pockets of the boy. And when I went indoors, and the boy says that when he went indoors and changed his clothes, he would find a straw and a grass falling out from his pocket. In that way, he understood that the animal was trying to make a what trying to make a nest in his pocket. Then one day grandmother's knitting was missing. One day what happened, grandmother's knitting here means a material like thread, cotton, wool, etc. Was missing, maybe for making something else. So many such things were found missing. We hunted for it everywhere, we searched for it everywhere, but without success here means we could not find it anywhere. Next day I saw something glinting in the hole. The next day only I could see something. What was that? I saw something glinting, shining in the hole in the banyan tree. Okay, going up to investigate. So when I saw something glinting there in the hall, I went near and I investigated. I examined. I saw that it was the end of grandmother's steel knitting needle. Okay, then I could find out some of the one thing there. That was the steel knitting needle of grandmother that was shining. Um, on looking further, on further investigation, I discovered that the hole was crammed, the hole was completely filled to the point of overflowing. It was filled to the point of overflowing, crammed with knitting. Every knitting materials were inside that. And amongst the wool were three baby squirrels, all of them white. But then there happened an amazing, a wonderful thing. What was that? When I looked, I could see three baby squirrels in white. They were all white in color. Grandfather had never seen white squirrels before, and we gazed at them in wonder. We were puzzled for some time, but when I mentioned the white rat's frequent visits to the tree, grandfather told me that the rat must be the father. Rats and squirrels were related to each other, he said, and so it was quite possible for them to have offspring, in this case, white squirrel. So, here towards the end of this paragraph, we get an explanation why white squirrels there. Okay, grandfather had never, it was a first experience for our grandfather also. He had never seen white squirrels before. And so both of them, the boy and the grandfather, were looking at the three baby white squirrels in great wonder. We were puzzled for some time. Okay, even they were puzzled or confused. They could not find a clear answer for that. But when I mentioned the white rat's frequent visits to the tree, at that time I pointed out that the white rat frequently visited the tree. Grandfather told me the rat must be the father. Then grandfather made a guessing like that. He said it must be the white rat and the white rat must be the father of the white squirrels. Rats and squirrels were related to each other. Why? Because there are some connection or a relation between rats and squirrels, the grandfather said, and so it was quite possible. So it is not less possible, but it is quite possible for them to have offspring or children or young ones, in this case white squirrels. So that is why the color of the baby squirrels turned to be white. So this is the end of this lesson. We will see again in another video lesson with more items. Thank you.